Maybe you've had the experience. You're driving in an unfamiliar place, but luckily you have that calm, confident voice whispering into your ear known as the GPS. And it's coming from your phone. You follow its instructions to the letter, and without question, turn left, it says, and you find yourself turning into a muddy field. You ever had this happen? We've actually had it happen a few times here in Amherst. Turn left. You have arrived, and yet it seems you're miles away from what is your actual destination. In the big city context, I spent some time in LA, and we would use our GPSs to try to navigate around traffic, big traffic jams, traffic clogs in the city. But again, they were not always very accurate. They would send us around all of these different twists and turns to try to find where it was, to try to find a shortcut where we could get away from the traffic. But lo and behold, then all of a sudden, everyone is basically doing the same thing, and you're creating a traffic jam unto itself just by trying to escape. GPS, the guides that we trust, the oracle in the sky, the satellite overhead that we come to rely on, from time to time, it can lead us astray. And we have other forms of GPS, if you will, in our day. We look to financial experts, for example, for guidance in order to protect our assets, protect our retirement. We have politicians that we seek for guidance to solve our nation's problems. These days, the word influencers is a word that we hear, and we seek them to give us tips on how we can get ahead in life. But these guides can often lead to dead ends. When we look for help from flawed human sources, which is what every one of these are, we can find ourselves lost, confused, and without hope. And in our text today, Zechariah chapter 10, the prophet will remind us that only God can provide us that GPS, that guidance that will never fail us. Only He can provide us what our life needs. Only He can satisfy the deep yearning of our souls. It was Augustine who said, "You, God, have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." Perhaps you come this afternoon and you can admit that you find your heart restless. Maybe you find that the comfort or success that the world promises you cannot truly satisfy the deep yearning of your heart. My encouragement to you today, the prophet's encouragement to you here in Zechariah chapter 10, is to seek God. Find rest in Him. In these verses, we are going to find 3 reasons why we can trust in God alone to provide us everything that we need. 3 reasons why we can trust in God alone in order that we might find rest for our restless hearts. Verses 1 through 3 provides us the first reason why we can trust in God alone. That reason is simply that God provides for us where others fail. Look at verse 1. Ask rain from the Lord in the season of the spring rain, from the Lord who makes the storm clouds, and He will give them showers of rain. To everyone, the vegetation in the field. We can appreciate rain this summer uniquely compared to other summers. We seem to be getting quite a downpour of rain this summer. It's been a very wet summer. And we must acknowledge that that is indeed the Lord's goodness to us, the Lord's mercy to us. It is hard for us to appreciate this because we live in a society that isn't quite so heavily reliant on farming, or at least if it is, we don't really notice it. But in the community of Israel, that was a deeply heavy farming community. Crop was the primary means of acquiring food. There was no grocery store. And when it came to the water that the crop needed, there really was no sophisticated irrigation system for preserving the water. The people were completely at God's mercy for the food that they were going to eat. The very food that they might grow on a daily basis became the food that they would enjoy that evening for dinner time. Rain, then, was a sign of God's favor. It was a sign that He was going to bless us with yet another meal or another week's worth of meals, depending on the abundance of the crop. And when no rain came, that was considered to be a sign of God's judgments. There's coming a time, the prophet says here in verse 1, when there will be no more droughts, when God's favor will be in abundant supply. The very notion of there being no rain as a sign of God's judgments, it will be so far removed from our minds that it will seem ridiculous to even consider, to even acknowledge. He contrasts this, however, with the present day. So he looks forward to a time of abundance, a time where the rainfall comes in abundance. But he contrasts that with the perspective of Israel in his day. Look at verse 2. For the household gods utter nonsense, and the diviners see lies. They tell false dreams and give empty consolation. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted for lack of a shepherd. Here, what Zechariah highlights is that there were false guides that Israel had grown accustomed to. The first false guide was a false source of provision in household gods, literal trinkets that depicted a sort of family god. In a modern context, think of a child's toy figurine, the G.I. Joe, or the Barbie doll, or a wrestling action figure, or whatever the case is. Those little toys, those little figurines, you'll notice there's not just one. There's an abundance of different kinds. And that is, of course, so that the business can make money. But each of those represent, if you will, different tastes, different likes that a child might have. That's kind of what a household god was in the nation of Israel. These little trinkets that, yes, depicted a false god, an idol. But this trinket was unique to each individual family. It was a family god that was ascribed to them. It was their favorite image relative to the others that other families might have had. And they believed that these little household gods were actually controlling the rainfall, rather than acknowledging God as the source of rain. Instead, they were ascribing it to these little family trinket gods that they had. And this would incur God's judgment, of course, because it is idol worship. It is a violation of God's law, no doubt. But here, Zechariah, he points out the folly of trusting in these little trinkets. He says, your deities are frankly non-existent. They represent nothing. They represent, at best, craftsmanship on the part of a man, because they were made by a man. They are a non-existent God, and therefore they utter nonsense. They utter incomprehensible speech because, of course, what can nothing say other than nothing, right? And so Zechariah here says those household gods are completely worthless to you. But as well, he says the diviners, they see lies and false dreams and give empty consolation. The false guides concerning specifically the future. Now that word diviners there could probably spark a little curiosity among us. We might be thinking of mediums or psychics in a pagan context. And that could be relevant. But actually, I think for Israel particularly, the covenant people of God, we can think of diviners as just simply any individual who was an alleged spokesperson for God. That is, they came before the people. They said, "Thus says the Lord." And what came out of their mouths were, in fact, lies, falsehood. Their lies primarily concerned false assurance of peace. This was the primary target of the prophets all throughout the prophets. Zechariah is one of the last of Israel's prophets. But if you were to survey all of the prophets that came before him, you would see over and over again the prophets call out those who allege to speak on behalf of God, who basically gave Israel false assurance. They told Israel that God was okay with them, that there was no judgment coming, that they could enjoy unending peace for as long as they wanted. Zechariah here says, no, those diviners, they in fact they tell false dreams. They might have even claimed, I had a dream, I had a vision, but in fact they were false. And the people therefore wandered about like sheep for lack of a shepherd. And that word shepherd there means a leader. They had no leader because this false assurance of peace was uttered to the kings especially. Great example of this would be Ahab. You can read about Ahab was given this false assurance of peace, and he went about doing all of the wicked things that he was accused of in the book of 2 Kings. You can read about. But he was given that assurance by these diviners, those who claimed to speak for God, but who only spoke lies. Now we too, we can apply this in our day today. We too can run to empty voices and powerless idols when we should be running to God for our guidance. We don't necessarily have the household gods, the trinkets, but we do have things that we turn to daily for a sense of comfort, for a sense of identity. And we consult these things daily instead of relying on God. Perhaps one example could be 401ks or our investments, right? We consult them every single day in order to have financial peace. But of course, anyone will tell you, especially if you're investing in a 401k, you really don't want to look at it every day, right? Because you'll get depressed. Ultimately, you'll be reminded daily why you need to rely on God, because you will see the fluctuation happen in real time. But if we fall into the trap of consulting that daily, seeking financial peace on this account, we lose sight of God, who is our provider. Perhaps social media could be another thing that we look to for comforts. All these little profiles that we make in order to reflect us, our unique identity. They are a reflection of us. And well, social media is in fact consulted daily for a sense of belonging, for a sense of community. How about diviners? What are some examples of diviners that we might have? Those who claim maybe to speak in behalf of God? Well, an obvious example of this could be your TV or radio preacher. Now, this isn't to disparage any preacher that we hear on TV or radio. In fact, we want godly preaching to fill the airwaves. We want that. But even those we consider trustworthy, they are still men. They still can actually speak false things. They still can, if we are not careful, lead us astray simply by relying so heavily on them rather than using them as an encouragement to be the noble Bereans that we are called to be. Ultimately, the idols and diviners of Zechariah's day may look different to us now, but the human heart hasn't changed. So where are we turning for help, for guidance, or for peace? Though others may fail or let us down, or the things we have may wither away, God will always provide. Well, secondly, a reason to trust in God is that God provides for us what no other can. Look at verse 3. My anger, God says through the prophet, is hot against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders. For the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. God says these shepherds, that is, these leaders of Israel, these kings of Israel, and I think here he is speaking both past and future, any leader that is responsible to doing what a good leader would do, what a shepherd would do. What is it that a shepherd does? A shepherd needs to lead, they need to feed, and they need to protect the flock from harm. Lead the flock, feed the flock, and protect from harm. And of course, we use this in the context of pastoral ministry, but this can apply to other leaders in a broader sense. A leader who leads, they cast the vision. They establish a safe environment for those whom they leave to thrive. That would be their feeding. And then, of course, they protect from enemies. In a political context, right? Every 2 years, we're given a new vision from a politician, right? In order to be the next president or the next congressperson, whatever. They are casting a vision for the future. And when they get into office, it is our expectation that they would establish for us a safe environment where we can thrive as individuals. And as well, when necessary, protect us from our enemies. Well, these shepherds were false shepherds that Zechariah speaks to, those who might rise from Israel, from within Israel, who do not necessarily fulfill this work. He's saying, I will punish them for failing to lead, for failing to feed, for failing to protect those whom I have entrusted into their care. And instead, the Lord of hosts cares for his flock. Interesting, that verb care is the same verb that's used to refer to an orphan, that is, caring for an orphan. You, Israel, you, people of God, are as orphans who have been abandoned by their father. Rest assured, Yahweh, your covenant God, cares for you, his people, and he cares for you as his own children. What is a reflection of his care? Well, in verse 4, we see God will raise up, God will provide a faithful shepherd. From him, Judah shall come the cornerstone. From him, the tent peg. From him, the battle bow. From him, every ruler, all of them together. Very rich terminology that's used here, and I believe that it refers to none other than Messiah, whom we know to be Jesus Christ. First off, it says, from him, that is, from Judah, shall come the cornerstone. That is, the stone that would act as the foundation stone upon which God would build an extraordinary house. The foundation stone is laid. But then it says the tent peg. In a housing sort of context, we could think of a tent peg rather as a nail. You can look around this room even, and you can see that nails are used to hang pictures. They're used to hang decor on the walls. Here then, the nail upon which the glory of God's house hangs. And then you have the battle bow. If you're thinking again in a home context, the bow would have been more of a defensive weapon, would have been something that was fired at a distance, would have been something that was to protect the home, so a home protection sort of deal. Messiah here is the foundation of the house. It is that upon which the glory of the house hangs, and it is that through which the house is protected. Messiah accomplishes all of this. And of course, Paul will actually allude to this in Ephesians chapter 2. You, that is the church, are members of the household of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus, that faithful shepherd, being the cornerstone, just as we see here, in whom the whole structure, being joined together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord. We see here in this passage then a foretelling of Messiah. God would provide a faithful shepherd in Messiah who would build God's house. And of course, we are beneficiaries of that here today as the church. Then in verse 5, we read, they shall be like mighty men in battles, referring there to Judah, trampling the foe in the mud of the streets. They shall fight because, here's the key, the Lord is with them. And they shall put to shame the riders on horses. Here, the prophet is declaring ultimate victory for Judah. How will that come about? Well, it will come about by virtue of the fact that the Lord is with them. Remember last time it said that the Lord will appear over them. That is, he will be the sort of standard, the flag that is held high, and the flag representing the Lord's presence with his people. Verse 6, I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them back, because I have compassion on them. The house of Judah, the house of Joseph, a reunited Israel will be saved, north and south. Remember, they will be reunited again, and they will be brought back. They will be regathered into the promised land. And they shall be as though I had not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. God provides for them here a redemption, ultimate redemption, salvation. And understand here that what is presented to us are three stages, three primary principles for salvation. Our salvation is dependent on God's character. It is because of God's character that we can say that we are at last redeemed. And it is by virtue of our redemption then that we are filled with great joy. Notice it says, they shall be as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord their God. There it is. My character is the basis for their salvation. I am the great promise keeper. I am their God, and by virtue of the promise I have made, I will keep it. They then are saved. They shall be as though I had not rejected them. And notice it says, 3 times in fact, that they will be glad. They will be filled with joy. It says, their hearts shall be glad. Their children shall see it and be glad. Their hearts shall rejoice in the Lord. Imagine a commander-in-chief who promises his troops, if any one of you are captured, I will come for you. In fact, we almost expect this of our commander-in-chief in the United States, right? If any one of our soldiers are captured, we would expect that eventually, at the most opportune time, a rescue will commence. No matter how long it takes, no matter how dangerous it gets, we expect that the commander-in-chief would say, you have my word. The soldiers in that situation know they can believe him. He has a reputation for keeping his word. But imagine these soldiers in a mission. They're captured and held in a remote prison camp. It's not hard to imagine. In fact, this is very much has happened multiple times in our nation's history. But imagine soldiers are captured, they're held in a prison camp. Conditions are brutal and months drag on. Some of the soldiers begin to think, maybe he's forgotten us. Maybe his promise didn't really amount to much. One night before dawn, however, all of a sudden they hear helicopters roar overhead. Explosions maybe even shake the ground, and a voice calls through the chaos, by order of our commander-in-chief, we have come to set you free. In that moment, the soldiers know that the commander-in-chief never stopped planning. The mission may have been costly and dangerous, but the commander-in-chief kept his word. And the joy that the soldiers feel in that moment is the joy of knowing that indeed he meant it. He didn't forget. He kept his promise. And this is a way to help us understand what the prophet here envisions. He is envisioning God's people. They are waiting in suffering and doubt, but God's promise never fails. He planned Israel's rescue from the beginning. It came at the cost of his own son. And when redemption finally comes, as the prophet envisions here, their deepest joy won't just be in being rescued. It will be in discovering that God meant every word that he said. And so God provides what no other can, a good shepherd and a redemption through that shepherd. Well, lastly, God provides for us a future like no other. Verse 8, I will whistle for them and gather them in, for I have redeemed them, and they shall be as many as they were before. Though I scattered them among the nations, yet in far countries they shall remember me, and with their children they shall live and return. If we carry the good shepherd analogy forward here, I will whistle. Imagine a shepherd who utters his voice and the sheep respond. The whistle, emphasis is not just simply on the sound that's projected outward, but also on the ears that are attuned to hear. Philip Keller, I might have mentioned before, he is a real-life shepherd who wrote a book on shepherding, and his goal is to help us understand why shepherding is such a rich metaphor, spiritually speaking. He recalls a day when a friend's dog leapt from a car into the vicinity of his flock and sent all of his sheep, over 200 of them, into a frenzied stampede. And he said when sheep get frightened, they can become quite reckless. He said some can even lose their unborn lambs in the panic. In this moment, Keller recalls that he hastily made his way to the field, and he called the sheep with his voice. They recognized his voice, and their trembling eased. Slowly, they made their way back to him, reassured by the presence of the shepherd. Here, God whistles, and his sheep return. My sheep hear my voice, Jesus the Good Shepherd said, and I know them, and they follow me. The sheep return. They're not driven back by force, but drawn by the voice of the Redeemer, the Good Shepherd. Verse 10, it continues, I will bring them home from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them to the land of Gilead and to Lebanon till there is no room for them. This is a promise of God's regathering of the people back to the promised land. He shall pass, verse 11, through the sea of troubles and strike down the waves of the sea, and all the depths of the Nile shall be dried up. The pride of Assyria shall be laid low, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart. I will make them, here's the key, strong in the Lord, and they shall walk in his name, declares the Lord. It's important for us to acknowledge here that it is not just merely the regathering of the people to the physical location, but it is also saving them spiritually. It is bestowing upon them a repentant heart, a repentant spirit that yearns to walk in the ways that they have been called. After the horrors of the Holocaust, the phrase "never again" has become a defining motto for the Jewish people. You'll hear this from time to time. Never again. It's a rallying cry for vigilance, for strength, for national survival. But as noble and courageous as that commitment is, their deep longing for safety, for peace, and for restoration remains unfulfilled. A strong military, strategic alliances, the Iron Dome, all of those things that Israel has in order to fulfill that never again mantra, those things are not enough on their own to make never again a reality. God promises here through his prophet to gather his people and bring them home from exile. But the key is not through self-reliance. They will not return by force of arms. They will return because I, Yahweh, will bring them home, verse 10. And I, Yahweh, will make them strong in the Lord, verse 12. It is because of what God will do that never again will at last become a reality. The security they long for, the security we long for, beloved. Whether that's a personal security, a national security, or eternal. It does not come through our resolve, through our resources. It comes through our return to the Good Shepherd. Only through him can we have a future unlike any other. Well, in a world of false guides and fragile hopes, we can wander like scattered sheep, restless and afraid. But in Zechariah 10, we hear the voice of the true shepherd, and the one who does not abandon his flock. He calls to the lost. He strengthens the weak, and he keeps every promise he has ever made. Don't walk in your own strength. Don't lean on failing shepherds. Come to the one who never fails. Let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who desires take the water of life without price. The cornerstone has been laid, the battle bow has been drawn, and the shepherd has spoken.